Welcome to Fashion Forward. Wicked panel that we've got here today. I think the word that we wanted to talk about was having a nice vibe, and we certainly hit it off today, so hopefully we can bring some of that forward. Just want to say I'm glad that even if this room isn't packed, it's clearly the most stylish room in here, the best dressed and the coolest people, which is what we wanted to see. I'm Toan Ravenscroft. I'm a partner at MSQ Sport and Entertainment. We use the power of sport and entertainment to connect brands with cultures in sport and entertainment. So, as much as I have spent nearly 20 years doing this, this is also my passion. I like to wear what I think is cool stuff, and bringing that from the football terrace back out. So when the team at SoccerX asked me to do this, I was absolutely delighted to get involved. A quick scene set, and then I'm going to get into some intros with everyone. Football and fashion have obviously gone together for almost as long as it's all existed, but the convergence has really seen remarkable growth, and that's probably why we're all in this room. And just from a stats basis, we're talking about a $24 billion industry by 2032, and there's a 6.3% compound annual growth rate annually. So this is serious stuff, and I think that's some of what we want to touch on: the who, the why, the what, where it can go, but also some of the business imperatives that sit around it. I'm going to shut up for a minute and hand you over, and we'll go along the line. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Jonathan, Marketing Director of MEYBA globally. Our brand is a heritage brand formed on the beaches of Barcelona, Barcelona's first ever kit supplier. We've brought the brand back over the last 2.5 years, really with a design ethic and a thought for not just making run-of-the-mill standard football shirts, understanding that football shirt culture and the way people wear football shirts is changing year on year, annually. The market's evolving, and for us, we feel the Venn diagram of football and fashion is moving closer and closer together. So we are excited to be here, excited to chat, and want to develop our industry into something very special.
Cool.
Thanks. My name is Nicole. I'm the founder of FC88, world's first upcycling company. We upcycle sports apparel, mainly football apparel, started out in football, trying to get them not landed on landfills and in incinerators, but bring them back to the fan. And we see that football, apparel, fashion, but also purpose is something that's moving closer together. Very keen to explore how this can happen, and how fashion and sports can help bring a connection closer to fans and brands and clubs, but also drive inclusion and create new revenue models for the sport.
Super. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lia. I'm leading lady of Mismas, where we translate the pride of the female fan into fashion. So my husband is a huge sports fan. We have 3 boys together. I visited a lot of fan shops, online and offline, and I discovered a gap, let's say. And I was wondering, okay, why is there not fan wear for girls and women? We work together with clubs, with federations, associations who want to bring their brand not only in the stadium but also out, and let girls and women wear that with pride. For me, it's a very personal story about diversity, about inclusion, bringing people together, and with a positive way, and having great social impact and creating an extra revenue model for clubs.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gauthier. I'm at Club Brugge for 6 years now, or 6 seasons. I run with my team the merchandise and e-commerce operations, and I present or represent a bit of the inside of the club today within the panel. I will hopefully give you some stats and some data, some figures, some stats, some survey results we've done recently. And yeah, we had a nice chat before, so I hope we can continue as we started.
I hope so. Right, let's keep the vibe nice and light and positive in this sort of post-lunchtime slot. We're going to touch on topics ranging from the bloke core trend that I'm sure you're all aware of, to terrace cool, the gazelles, the sambas, total 90 and Nike. We were talking about that a second ago, kind of really tapping into that noughties aesthetic now. Retro, vintage shirts, footballers as high fashion models, Gen Zs at festivals wearing a Lothar Matthäus shirt without knowing who he is, through a range of different audiences, right through to the current, where you've got boots-only summer and football boots being worn at the Met Gala. What is going on? So that's what we want to cover, as well as touching on some really interesting things: sustainability, fast fashion, overconsumption, and then looking at how the business models can flex within that. So I want to start with the who, because I think, and what I've just touched on there is there's a range of people tapped into football and fashion. I think this is something that we've all seen, the wide plethora of people who are now wearing football shirts. Fashion is a great way for brands, for clubs to broaden that audience, and it seems like a really exciting opportunity. So, Gauthier, I'm actually going to start at the far end with you. You've actually looked at this from a statistical basis, and I just wondered if you could enlighten us a little bit more around the broadening of audience and the opportunity that's there for a club.
Yeah, so I'm here together with Lia, for instance, because we are working together on dropping a new full female collection June, July this year. So what she says is 100% right, and we talked about it, is that like when you bring up women into fan merchandise, it's like, yeah, make it pink and it's okay, and then they will buy. But on the contrary, they hate it because it doesn't relate to the club, so you lose the club identity if you go for the basic colors. So we learned by doing a survey with I think 700 ladies from our fan base, and they all said, finally, you're listening to us. We want to have something of our own. Then we did like a focus group. And the focus group said they were more diehard than I could imagine. Like, it kind of creeped me out a bit, but they were like, "No, I want logos. It has to be black and blue, and don't you dare to do pink and all that stuff." So they were like, "Wow, okay, you just want something of your own," and that's actually the essence of what we learned, is that don't try to push them into something they don't want. They want full club colors, full club attire. And that's a bit how we try to improve our merchandise strategy, is to make something for everyone. Mm-hmm. In football, selling shirts is that important. So we learned that not everyone can afford a shirt. So we kind of made our own knockoff shirts, like 40 euros for a shirt and a pants, and then threw out the door. And it didn't hurt me at all. It actually boosted my other sales of the regular shirts, because people can pay what they can afford, and you cannot push them into something that's too expensive. So that what you learn is to make something for everyone. So kids, low budget, but also female and all that stuff.
I think that's really interesting, and something we'll definitely come back to in terms of the additional pieces that you can put around, say, your main tech supplier and how that works. Lia, we sort of touched on it there. If you like, the raison d'etre, the reason that you're in this is to broaden into that new audience. So we'd love to think more about that, and I think you were talking about the passion and the love for the game, and we'd really just love to touch on your perspective on that journey that you're going on.
I must say that the journey that we did together with Gauthier, with Club Brugge, is so interesting, because it was a good news show from the beginning till almost at the end. But we knew there was a gap, and we knew the interest was there, and we knew that these ladies were really committed to the club and were identifying themselves with what the brand is. But what we didn't know, that they had closets full of objects that they're just buying, but not feeling really connected to in some kind of way. For example, they were talking about, I want to have lingerie, I want to have purses, I want to have a blazer so I can wear it to work, and that's the story. We have to bring it beyond and create more value, as we said before, for every item. So it's not just how can I say it?
A bad rework of something that a man would wear. So we had asked, it's not like a cheap knockoff. It has to be unique in its own.
And I think you've hit upon something nice there that we touched on as well earlier, Nicole. I'll bring you in here, which was the fact that some of the women's Euros jerseys, well, you can tell the story, are being skewed for people like me to be able to wear, which I think is an interesting point too.
Yeah, I think in the pre-conversation we had, we talked about the women's Euro this summer and the women's jerseys just being launched by Nike, Adidas, Puma, and that almost all teams have their own designs for their women's teams. And I know my background is with the Dutch FA, worked there for a long time with Nike, worked on a couple of women's jerseys back then, and we had this inquiry from male fans, to get the women's jersey in a male fit. So this was really a big revolution of, okay, there was this one home kit in a male fit, and then there was a female fit, then there was a female design in a female fit. We never thought of a female design in a man fit jersey. And we got these requests in, which is very interesting, because then you see that sometimes the connection of a fan to a jersey is not the team. And I think Jonathan can enlighten us more about that. It's with sometimes even only design, or maybe even the designer. And they want to buy jerseys or apparel that resonate with them and their own identity. And often that's based on the club, player, league, team they're supporting, but often that's not. And that's a very interesting insight, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to come in there. I think what I was going to say was, how are you looking at that broader audiences outside of perhaps the core fan?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've obviously our main mission as a football brand is to be a technical supplier for clubs. But for us, not being sort of in the top 4 or 5 suppliers in the world in terms of volume, we had to find different interesting ways of connecting our product to different markets, to younger markets and younger audiences that didn't know the history and heritage of MEYBA. So we looked at how different groups of people wear football shirts, and there's, the guys from Classic are in. The proliferation of classic design, retro shirts, reissues is huge. So for us, we see ourselves as a design business that makes beautiful products, but how can we connect our football heritage to the trends that's going on out there? And for us, music and fashion was a strong way to connect. So we connected with Live Nation, we connected with some big music organisations around Europe and built bespoke football shirts for their festival merch stands. We then built bespoke products for DJs and bands to own and then sell. The music merch is behind football merch. It's way behind in terms of live events. You can get a Fruit of the Loom t-shirt with your band on it for 30 quid at a festival. And our approach to those festivals and those businesses was, let us make you some merch with genuine love on a beautiful football shirt that encapsulates what your event stands for. So we've seen, and this year we will sell nearly as many football shirts that don't have a football club on them as football shirts with a football club on them. And that, for us, that just shows it's, like the guys say, it's about design. It's about understanding your audience, understanding the essence of the event. We do an event called Download in the UK, which is a big rock metal event. And merch at those events is huge. And now we have an ongoing contract, and people are collecting their Download football shirts in the way that years ago they were collecting their Fruit of the Loom t-shirt with the bands on the back. So football shirt culture is, it's inherent in clubs, but it's moving outside of that. And we've done really well with music, but there will be the next thing that we partner with, and it's just a way to wear these beautiful products that you never really have to iron, which is a massive bonus for me, in different ways. And there is a trend for it at the moment. Lots of different people are wearing football shirts, and it will go up and down. But I think our product and lots of other suppliers' products is beautiful, and it shouldn't just be related to a football team. There's lots of ways to put this culture on, in different sort of environments.
Brilliantly put, and I think you brought us onto something nice, and I'd like to talk to you about this, Nicole, which is sort of drops culture, limited editions, and especially with the work that you do in kind of almost bespoke one-offs, really looking at that space. So I think that there's something interesting there in thinking beyond the football and how we do those limited edition drops.
Yeah, and it's not just, those limited edition drops. And of course, me coming from the sustainability angle and wanting to lengthen the life cycle of a shirt, because every club launches a new kit with massive emotional stories, storytelling pieces, the DNA of the club, etc. And some way, 10 months later, it's worth nothing. We're putting it away. We're launching a new kit, and that kit from 10 months ago is just being dumped or destroyed or whatever. So there's a challenge here of creating cool product that's relevant to audiences, different audiences, male audiences, female audiences, kids audiences, without driving over consumption. Because if we talk about fashion, we have to talk about fast fashion, and we have to talk about end of life of fashion. And I think that's something that will be more of a topic going forward in football culture as well. And it's always, and coming from a federation, I know the importance of the kit supplierships, the financials behind it, and the business model. So it's trying to find ways to add value from our point of view, add value to the jersey, lengthen the life cycle of that jersey without trying to destroy anything of the story of the jersey or the kit supplier or the sponsors or the club. It's adding on to it. And we talked about festivals quite often now because we see the product that we make, bucket hat, tote bag, gym bags, the cooler duffel bags, big and small items, are often used in those festival scenes. You know, yes, it's being taken into the stadium on a match day, but it's also used when they go to Coachella because they have to put their phone and key somewhere. So it's cool that it ties into those other industries.
Brings me on nicely, and Gauthier, I'd love to get your perspective on this from a club point of view. You mentioned those additional opportunities, if you like. So you're talking about being in a festival wearing a football shirt, different occasions, and you mentioned how you'd sort of expanded beyond the tech partnerships, and you had, I think, a copper, a line that you guys had done, and some others. It'd just be interesting to think about how you think about that from a club point of view, and the ways that you can get your club out there through different manufacturers.
Yeah. So what we do always is we are a national brand. So you might know us from the Champions League or whatever, but we do not have a lot of abroad sales. So we try to stick to our domestic market or buy for what we can sell. So we never have thousands of shirts extra. If we have some extra, we sell them at -50 the next year, and they're gone. So we never have too much destruction or destroying to do. But adding like retro shirts has been really cool for us because, like with the people of Coppa, who are also from the Netherlands, they take a really great care, and not just making a shirt, but making the same material, the same type of print, the same fit. So they actually take a real shirt and they get their inspiration from there. So that's good on them. And yeah, I think one of the great examples in fashion and football is AC Milan, who have done a great thing with Off-White now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within a few years, AC Milan will just be AC Milan as a fashion brand. They will not need anyone else to make it work because they're just becoming so big. They're also one of the first teams that made a full female collection, not available in male sizes. So those are some guys to look at, and we learn from them is that you just have to create the opportunity for a kid to wear your jersey with your club crest on it. Doesn't matter where it comes from, but if you can have a bit of control on it, that's what makes a club bigger, and not just the merchandise for that season. You know, like I have my targets, but the main target is get as many people as possible a fan of your club. That's it, anyway.
Anything to add to that, Lia, just from your perspective and what you're doing in the women's space around that?
Yeah, I would jump on what Nicole said before, and I thought it was a challenge for me as well. You know, I'm coming up with something brand new. A lot of clubs are welcoming me with open arms, wanting to tell the story, want to do something great, but how can we do it in a sustainable, smart way without just overproduce and produce and produce? So I went to talk to some experts. I'm surrounded by people who help me build a collection in a very, very cool way. And what we're trying to do at Mismas is really start off with several fabrics. And we find the right fabrics, and we try to establish as much styles from one fabric. So we're not going to do overproduction of the fabrics. We're going to work customized. We're not going to do just copy-paste for every club. No, we're going to work some customized, involving the female fan, knowing that we're going to create something that they will carry for a long time, and it will add value. And I love it when Jonathan said it before, it's about heritage. Mm-hmm. And they want to keep it and keep it alive and bring it outside and again and again. So that's one thing. On the other hand, I went to visit all of my factories myself because I found the human touch very important, which is also a way of creating something that you know it's going to last forever and maybe for a long time. Also to participate with the clubs and do the collaborations in the right way, but knowing what you're doing is happening in a way that it has respect for people who are making it and will be carrying it after all. And I think that is also an added value for the end customer, the end user, that they know where it's coming from and it's being created in a way that we have respect for everybody's work.
Yeah, if I can jump in, like sure. It's really admiring what you do because it will be a tough challenge, I think, to get the first clubs. We're happy to be one of the first or maybe the first. Because like budget-wise, in my total purchase budget, it's not that much. But if you look at just the nominal number, it's a lot of money. And I went to my director and I said, I want to spend this on full female. He was like, are you crazy? A female, yeah, it doesn't sell. And we don't know if it doesn't sell. But if I do like a male collection twice the amount, he's like, yeah, cool, do it. So there's like a barrier.
There's a lot of perspectives and barriers there.
It's like a
perception
block or a
still
barrier
going on in the game.
in football merchandise. Like if you talk about female fashion, like, ooh,
wow,
be careful. And why? Let's try, let's go. And it's not a big risk, you know.
That's interesting when I feel like I'm speaking every day about the power of women's sport. You know, we see Serena Williams at the Women's FA Cup final on Sunday. And, you know, that feels like that's interesting that you're still facing that. What I wanted to do now is we've sort of talked about the broader opportunity, but I'm also really interested about the core fan. And you sort of say, you know, you can go to music festivals and get music fans wearing your stuff. You can do that. But what about the core grit? I kind of chuckle to myself if I think about some of the football coaches that I grew up with, seeing me on stage with a pair of Gucci gazelles, which, you know, it would be nonsense to them. Like, how do we make sure, and I'd love to come to you first, Jonathan, on this, that we sort of work to protect that core as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for a technical supplier to, you know, our main option or our main job is to deliver a beautiful football shirt that will appeal to a broad market. It needs to be worn by an 18-year-old girl who wants to wear it as a fashion item and as a 50-year-old man who wants to represent his team. So it's a real challenge, but you know, I think it can be done across a range. You know, it can be done with additional products, but I think for me that the most important thing to do is understand who you're working with, is to get to the heart of the brand. You know, I think I probably shouldn't say this, wearing a top with 𝐬𝐬𝐲 on it, but you can over-design in football shirts. You can really, really try and put every single thing into every single design to try and please everybody. And for us, sometimes we feel that that's, you know, it's fraught with danger. I think if you can understand each of those fans and the club that's at the heart of it, I think natural design will lead you to a product that everybody's proud of. And I think we talked earlier about giving people different ways to wear football shirts. You know, just because I'm a medium, it doesn't mean that I don't want to wear an oversized shirt, or you know, my partner wears XXL football shirts and wears them as dresses. There's lots of different ways to style football shirts. There's lots of different ways to wear them. It's not just old guys playing five-a-side on a Monday afternoon now. There's really interesting ways, and I think that's also down to the clubs. It's also down to the supplier. And the marketing teams at those suppliers to innovate in a way that they display their product. You know, long gone are the days where you had a player in, you know, shorts, shirts and socks and lined up and there's your kit release. Kit releases have gone absolutely bananas over the last few years, and probably in some way maybe over the top too much. Can we do different releases of the same product for different customer groups? Lots of different ways to sort of innovate in that area and try and, but as I said earlier, try and keep the heart of the club, everything you do, and the love of design. And in our experience, if you get that bit right up front, the sales come afterwards.
Nicole, I sense that you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, sorry. No, absolutely right. On the other hand, you often also see that there's this core audience that's, you know, calling out for, do we need a third kit? Do we need to swap our home kit this year when nothing changes, you know? And Brentford, we talked about this, I think, earlier in SoccerX as well. Brentford relegated their jersey for one season during COVID. What the reason may be, you know, a lot of fans appreciated that they didn't have to buy the new jersey, the home jersey, because the jersey kept the same. I think one of you guys had the example of, you know, there's going to be a kit used for 2 seasons. Maybe that could be a little bit more expensive because you know that's going to be an actual, you know, relevant jersey for the next 2 seasons. So maybe that could be £110, £120 instead of, you know, the normal £90.95. Yeah. But it's a balance, I think, between the two of creating beautiful product, which is, I think, made with the right DNA and design in mind, versus for a core fan being pushed for overconsumption. Yeah. A third kit, is that necessary actually, or a anniversary kit? And of course we're on the back end of that as FC88, because we see the massive stockpiles of not sold jerseys or jerseys used by teams but then don't have any use after those 10 months. So it's a balance there between that and that business case that keeps driving, you know, the motor of football.
And I think you've hit upon an interesting topic that was seamlessly our next one that we were going to come on to around fast fashion and overconsumption, and perhaps the initial tension that I certainly assumed with clubs. You know, clubs want to commercialize, they want to sell, and I think that that's perhaps we were talking about it, you know, perhaps an outdated view of volume, and actually there's another way to do it. We're adding a bit of value, which I think was the language you spoke. Gauthier, I'm going to come to you again, sorry, down the end, but from the club point of view, to put you on the spot, how do you balance those demands of adding a bit more value necessarily, rather than just going, please buy as much as you can and get those shifts shifted?
Yeah, I think the main thing we learned, you know, with 6 seasons, you have some successes, you also have some failures, is that you cannot push anything to a fan thinking that a badge on it will sell. They're not idiots. So if you do not have a story related to the club, or as we said, you need to find that identity and that merge between merchandise and the identity of the club, then you will do very bad in sales. So we as a club always trying to find the story first and then try to make the shirt afterwards, or maybe kind of the same way, because it's a lot harder to make up a story to make them buy the story instead of doing it vice versa, of course. Also in collections, you know, we can try this, we saw this fashion brand do this or that, but if there's no link to the club, then they're like, yeah, just made the same thing but with a logo on it, I don't want it, or it's too expensive, or I don't care. Yeah. So the fans actually are pushing us as a club, I cannot speak for all clubs, to be respectful to the past of the club, to the history, to the heritage, to the value that's there, because it's enormous, you know, it will never stop existing, you know, it's what you have. And if you do not listen to them,
nice there, sorry, just to interject, around authenticity and that balance, perhaps, if there's people from clubs here, I don't know, between the commercial department maybe and the marketing and the brand and the communications department. And I come from a world of sort of creative and storytelling in that space, and I'm sort of music to my ears. I'm like, yeah, we're starting with a story. That's where we want to start. We can do something cool and interesting there. And I think building from that authentic fan insight versus necessarily just hit a big number, please. And I think that comes down to the choice of partners. And I know that story's at the heart of what you're doing as well, Jonathan.
Yeah, and I think, again, I might get told off for saying this, but I think it's actually up to clubs and retailers to come up with innovative ways to take the purchasing of football shirts and football merchandise forward. You know, it's a really rigid structure that's been around for many, many years. Shirt comes out, go through the season, discount it, launch the next one. You know, we've all been changed over the last 15 years through subscription models, through Netflix and Amazon. You know, I'm still waiting for the first club to do a subscription model around football shirts. You know, can you be given an incentive to recycle your shirt at the end of the season into a different product? You know, can I buy a limited edition that the club will have for a number of different years? If I'm going to buy a shirt this year, you know, help me buy something else in a different way. There's you know, the clubs and the manufacturers work together to make beautiful products. But I think whether it's a club or whether it's retailers, there are different ways to get this product out there, and there's different life cycle of products. You know, we know that through you know, chatting to Nicole. It just because it's a football shirt doesn't mean it can't be something else. It doesn't mean it loses its value at the end of the season. It still has its value, but could it be used in a different way? And I think up front, that purchase, giving people different purchase options, and not just using Klarna, but thinking about it really differently, for me, is the next evolution of sort of football and merchandise retail.
Lia, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Jonathan. And what I wanted to add is you can see it as a major challenge, but also as a major opportunity for these clubs they have this massive impression, they have this position as a role model, being huge industry where so many people look up to, small children, men, call it out, but they have this huge opportunity to really give an example how they're going to do it. And it's great to work with clubs who see that and want to translate into storytelling and do something different and really create a movement that could inspire others. And what you're doing and our talk that we had before this morning, it was the same. Like, okay, let's all participate together, and how can we help each other, and can we reinvent every style or every way that we worked, and not, we have to evaluate and keeping track.
I think this has brought us beautifully onto the business model, which is what we wanted to talk about. Nicole, I don't know if you wanted to come in.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of very cool pilot projects going on in the UK now. where brands, just one of the kit suppliers, the big ones, are testing out if you buy the new kit and you send in your old one, so it's not getting landfilled or whatever, you're getting a discount on the new one, and they are making sure that the old one is getting reused in, a couple of ways. Yes, that could be through upcycling. We would love to do that, but it could also be donation schemes, grassroots teams, and all these kinds of, resellers, whatever there is. So it's also, like Lia said, it's the responsibility of the industry together to think of ways, creative ways, to change that business model and to add value rather than pushing on volume. And I think that's, for me, it's key, because we, as a very small new company in that massive industry of, I think it was 200 billion euros a year, we have to be creative. We have to add value to the current partners instead of trying to be Greenpeace and say, look at what Puma does, look at what Nike does. That's not the way to go and to move forward.
If I can jump in, we did a fan survey with 2,000 fans just on merchandise, and sustainability was one of the main chapters. And what we learned is that it's a lot more top of mind than we thought would be with our fans, because we have like an old school fan base. But they were like, yeah, we asked questions like, if you knew it was made in Europe instead of in the East, would you buy it or would you pay more? 60% said, yes, I would. And of course, that's a bit of bias, because they say they would, but will they? So I don't know about that. But just given the fact that the majority said, I would pay more if it's locally produced, or I want to pay more for limited editions instead of the bulk or the volume. Something like that. And like we changed, it's a stupid example, but we changed our shopping bags from plastic to recycled paper. 80% said, I love that you did that. Because, if you have a paper bag and it rains, it's a mess. But they just love the idea that we did it. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that really was a thing with our fans. I thought they didn't care, but they really care a lot.
Same goes for the REPHER study that Sports Innovation Lab did last year, and they published it together with Klarna. And it was all about only in female sports merchandising. So we're talking about the female fans for female sport. And there the results were amazing. Like, okay, 79% of the female fans feel underrepresented. 81% would buy if the offer would exist for herself. So we're talking about an industry they did the study in Canada, Mexico, the US, and Spain and Germany, if I'm not mistaken. So we're talking about an industry about $4 billion only per year for female merch in the women's industry, in the women's sports industry. So that's huge. So we have to change. We have to find alternatives.
I think that was hopefully a really interesting sort of journey that we've gone on there, from the business model, sustainability, around lots of topics. I want to bring us back to something slightly different here and sort of change gear, if you like, a little bit, which is to talk about footballers as fashion icons. And I think this is something that we've all got an opinion on. From streetwear to catwalks, I sort of mentioned the Met Gala and football boots being worn on that, and we spoke about the chicken and the egg, what came first. So, Jonathan, I'm going to put you on the spot with this. What's your view with regards to footballers as fashion icons and setting that?
Okay, I think there are absolutely footballers as fashion icons, but I wouldn't limit it to footballers. I think anybody who's brave in any environment that they work in can become a fashion icon. I think it's really easy for me to see the difference between a footballer or a basketball player or a musician who loves fashion and takes pride in what they wear and wants to innovate. I think it's really, and then on the converse side of that, it's really then easy to see footballers that have just been plastered in a certain product to try and flog it. It's a really simple equation for me. So yes, absolutely, footballers that love fashion and take pride in what they do and pride in what they wear are fashion icons. But I think we can't lump everybody together. There's lots of footballers that don't care about it and will wear what they've been given. So yes, I think it's important. I think, again, we talked about it earlier about in the NFL, the guys basically are walking down a catwalk every time, but some of them don't want to do it. And some of them are paid lots of money to wear clothes, and others just turn up in shorts and t-shirt, and away they go. So yeah, it's a really interesting debate.
Have they become billboards for fashion brands?
Yeah, because they're paid to wear it. So they are absolutely a billboard. And I think certain footballers have been doing it for years. And I think if we look through our archive at MEYBA, which has been going for a long time, we've got tremendous amount of really cool shots of Diego Maradona wearing all sorts of stuff that wasn't paid for. He wears it because he liked it at the time, and now it looks really cool.
Yeah.
But did it at the time? I don't know. The same with Johan Cruyff. Loads of amazing images of the product that he wore, and now we hark back to that. Was he trying to be a fashion icon, or was he just an individualist who loved what he did?
It's cooler when you don't try, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Nicole, I think with your background at the 𝐷𝐸𝐵, we were talking about national team squad arrivals. That moment. I'd love to touch on that with you.
Yeah. So until a couple of years ago, everybody just wore something that was probably the first thing they found in the closet that morning. But then we, from the FA point of view, started to capture that moment. It was a moment that you come to the national team before a international window, and you saw the authentic fashion-focused players wearing Gucci and everything else or whatever, and you saw the people like Frankie de Jong, who were just wearing a very plain Nike T-shirt, black on black with jeans. And one fun quote about that was back in 2014, when Louis van Gaal was still the head coach, and the players were going overboard. We have Memphis Depay. We have a couple of those players who are really going overboard with the big hats and everything. And he wrote this new rule in his playbook for the Dutch national team. If you come to the 𝐸𝐵 campus to come play for the national team, you have to wear something without logos, without any big designs. It's not about you, it's about the team. So there was this, big uplift on design, and then everybody, we have to have the focus on football and the players. And within a club, it's different because you have 2, sometimes 3 matches a week. The national team is there for 10 times a year, so it has to be focused on that team performance. But it's an interesting, movement that goes on within football.
And to see that backlash sort of happening relatively organically that way.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that you guys wanted to add to too, just in terms of the moments when you're seeing people in the kits, in the fashion forward items rather than the kit? Sorry.
When you ask me what is fashion, fashion is a way of expressing yourself, getting yourself out there, and everybody does that in his own unique, special way. The people who love to do it in a more extravagant way, in a more noble way, and they want to shout, and there are people who want to do it in a subtle way. That is what fashion is for me. And I think the link is easily made between football and fashion, and why it is so easy to combine them, because we're both talking about passion, about almost religion, about something you believe in, about it's so you can translate it and you can dot the two to each other so easily. And I would say, everybody can be who he is. Live and let live, and let everybody express themselves in the way they want to do it.
Nicely put. One question that I have for the panel is around fatigue, and I study the releases, especially from the trade, and it doesn't seem that like a week went by, maybe last year, where it wasn't insert brand creates insert branded football shirt, and you sort of go, okay, guys, can we move this on a little bit? So my question to you, and we'll start at that end, is there fatigue around fashion in football, and has it become a little bit too done, and actually it's like, we need to go for something else now?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't see that it's slowing down, to be honest. I think it's still running. An example from last weekend, we had a boot sale in my neighborhood, and I had like 5, 6 old shirts I got from my previous supplier, like a Bologna shirt, which was nice. There was a double XL, long sleeved. So for me, that's way too big. Guess who bought it? A 14-year-old girl, this thin, long blonde hair. I was like, you sure? Yeah, it's cool. And okay, yeah, fine. So it's changing a lot. Like the young people just want to own a football shirt. I don't think they know if Bologna is a Serie A team or Serie B. They don't know. They have no clue, but they don't care. They just like the fit and the thing. So that's a bit of an answer to your question. I think for me, it's not slowing down. I think it's finding a bit of the magic between all the blur, because now we had a lot of English teams pushing out videos of their shirt launches, and it's always the same thing. Current player, retro, or old player, bar, cafe, hey, what's up, hey, nice, having a coffee. And then if you leave out the logo of the club, it's 6 times the same video. So I said, like, and my team was like, oh, that's cool, but I've seen it 20 times already. So I think we are hitting a bit of a ceiling, and that's what you're trying to aim at. Like, guys, come on, it's always the same. Let's go beyond that.
Sort of towards wrapping up this session, and I think where I really wanted to take it is just that. Creatively, what is next? Because that's where I'm always curious, because I agree with you. I love the Ozzy Osbourne Aston Villa kit video. It was wicked. It was really fun. But then, you know, Chelsea did one, I think, last week, someone tell me, you know, with Suggs and with Cole Palmer and Jam Sandwich. What's next? How can we level up? What's the ambition creatively to fuse fashion and football in a really innovative way?
Yeah, I mean, so if you think about fatigue, I think I feel fatigued by it, but I live in a place where I follow every single football team, every single media outlet that's got anything to do with football, so I get everything. So I do get fatigue. But a normal fan of a normal club probably follows their club and probably 4 or 5 media outlets. So their fatigue is once a season. So I think you just got to deliver something directly for that fan. They get 3 kit releases over the course of a year and make them special. So it's really easy to say there's fatigue. It's really easy to say that we're trying to get fans to buy lots of shirts every year. On the flip side of that, there is thousands and thousands and thousands of fans where kit launch day is the best day of the year. Yeah. It's the expectancy around a new season. It's none of the pain from the previous season, or it's celebrating the previous season. So it can be a beautiful thing, but it's up to the brands and the clubs and the suppliers to make it interesting every year, and that's our responsibility. And that's, you know, it's something that we're never going to run out of ideas, but we've got to keep coming up with new ones.
And I think to add on to that, and this is me as a football fan, is I think there are more swaps of kit suppliers than ever. There are younger brands coming.
Could be more. There could be more.
Sure, absolutely. But there are you know, retro brands coming up. There are new brands coming up, like Gauthier in the last 8 years. It's amazing what they've done to the market. And I think that's also tapping into not having any fatigue as a fan, because look at what's going to happen when the DFB is going to launch their first Nike kit. You know, we're all going to watch it. We're all going to follow it. We're all going to read the feedback. But it's going to be a massive thing beyond football, that's a cultural clash between the US brand and Germany and Adidas heritage there. So I think to add on to what Jonathan said, it's not just we might be fatigued. And sometimes from an FCA point of view, I'm like, do we really have to have that same red and white striped jersey with the same sponsor with just a different color? Probably not, to be honest. But as a fan, I absolutely agree with you. The emotional layer, the passion that taps into the audience of and the football fan, it's something that I might want to say fashion can't even replicate, because there's a deeper layer of the unknown within football that fashion doesn't have. So the magic of the football jersey will stay the same probably in the future. It's just how do we market it, and how do we are more creative in design and in the end-of-life use of that old kit.
Brilliant. Lia, in terms of innovation and thinking...
Yeah, I was nodding and so yeah, she's right. And to top on that, I would say we have to be smart. I'm just getting to know the industry better and better. Yesterday, I had amazing talks with amazing people, and I think if we could all use our expertise and bundle it up and create something good and learn from each other, that we don't have to produce and overthink, and we can just already work with a lot that we already have, and be smarter and be innovative and keep on thinking how can we do better.
Yeah, I can just add, stay close to your identity of your club, and if you do that, then you will always win as a football team.
I like that. With 14 seconds to go on the timer, this is magically full circle. And I think what I would love to say is we've hopefully gone around lots of different topics with that, from things like sustainability, the business model, but where we've ended is actually fans and authenticity, and that makes me very, very happy as a fan primarily. So thank you very much, everyone. Feel free to grab us. I'm sure everyone's got time for a chat.